He had learned that ignoring them only led to mistakes. When he straightened, his legs felt firmer, his focus sharper. Somewhere in the fog, a shape moved. It was slow, careful, and human. He did not call out. The presence alone was enough. Two lives passing near each other, each carrying their own silence, their own reasons for walking forward. The shape faded again, swallowed by the mist, and he continued on, carrying the awareness that even in the thickest fog, paths sometimes crossed, if only briefly. As he moved beyond the gentle rise, the air seemed to settle again, heavier and closer to the ground. The fog wrapped around his legs first, then his waist, then his chest, until it felt as though he were walking through something alive, something breathing slowly alongside him. He matched his pace to that imagined rhythm, step by step. His thoughts turned inward, softer now, less demanding. He noticed small details he might have missed before, the way moisture gathered along the seams of his sleeves, the faint creak of leather with each movement, the subtle warmth that built inside his coat as his body worked. These details anchored him, reminding him that this moment, however uncertain, was real and happening now. A memory surfaced without warning. A quiet afternoon long ago, walking through mist near home, when the world had felt gentle and unthreatening. He remembered how the fog had lifted then, revealing familiar shapes and paths. The memory did not make him sad. Instead, it brought a calm acceptance, a reminder that fog did not last forever, even if it lingered longer than expected. The ground leveled out again, and his steps grew more even. He listened to the sound they made, steady and unbroken. In that rhythm he found reassurance. Whatever lay ahead would come in its own time. There was no need to rush toward it. He took another breath, slow and full, and let it out just as carefully. The fog shifted slightly, opening a narrow corridor of visibility before him. It was not far, but it was enough to continue. The narrow corridor of clearer air moved with him, never quite staying still, but always offering just enough space to step into. He followed it naturally, without questioning why. In the fog, trust came in small forms, and this was one of them. His shoulders ached now, the quiet reminder of weight carried for longer than the body preferred. He rolled them gently, feeling the tension ease a little. There was comfort in acknowledging the strain instead of fighting it. The fog did not judge tiredness, it simply surrounded it. A faint light appeared ahead, dim and colorless, like a thought half-formed. It could have been the sky thinning or simply a trick of the mist. He did not hurry toward it. He let it remain what it was, a suggestion rather than a promise. As he walked, he became aware of how quiet his mind had grown. Worry had not vanished, but it had softened, losing its sharp edges. In its place was a steady awareness, a calm readiness. He realized that this, too, was a kind of strength, one he had never learned to name before. The ground beneath him felt firmer, less saturated, and his steps grew more confident. Each one carried him forward, out of the past and into whatever waited next. The fog still surrounded him, but it no longer felt quite as heavy. He continued on, guided by that faint light and the quiet certainty that moving forward gently and patiently was enough for now. The faint light ahead did not grow brighter, but it became steadier, as if it had decided to stay with him. He walked toward it with unhurried steps, letting the slow rhythm of movement carry him forward. His breath rose and fell in time with his pace, and the world felt momentarily balanced, held together by something simple and quiet. He noticed how the fog changed the sound of everything. Even his own movements felt softened, as though the air were gently cushioning each step. It gave him the strange sense that he could move without being noticed, that the world was allowing him to pass through without resistance. That thought eased something tight inside his chest. A low wooden fence appeared suddenly to his right, emerging from the mist a post at a time. He followed it for a while, fingers brushing the damp wood as he walked. The texture grounded him, a reminder that there were boundaries here, shapes that existed whether he could see them all or not. He did not know where the fence led, but he appreciated its presence, the quiet guidance it offered. His thoughts returned briefly to the word beginning. He wondered if this was one, or if it had started long before he ever stepped into the fog. Perhaps beginnings were not marked by clear moments, but by gradual shifts you only recognized later when looking back. When the fence ended, fading back into the fog, he did not feel lost. He paused, took one slow breath, and chose a direction that felt right. The light ahead remained, patient and unchanged, waiting for him to continue. The direction he chose led him into quieter ground, where even the faint sounds of others seemed to disappear. The fog here felt deeper, thicker, as though it had settled for a longer time. He moved carefully, aware that solitude could feel heavier than company, even when both were silent. His boots brushed against something solid, and he stopped. Bending slightly, he found a discarded helmet resting in the grass, its surface dull with moisture. He did not touch it at first. He simply looked at it, letting its presence speak in its own quiet way. Someone else had been here, had paused here, had left something behind. When he finally picked it up, it felt heavier than he expected. He turned it in his hands, noticing the scratches, the signs of use. There was no name inside, no mark to say who it belonged to, just an object waiting to be found. He set it gently at the base of a nearby post, a small act of order in a place that felt uncertain. As he straightened, a sense of respect settled over him. Not loud, not dramatic, just a quiet acknowledgement of shared paths and unseen stories. He continued walking with a little more care, as if the ground itself had become meaningful. The fog shifted again, thinning just enough to reveal the outline of distant trees. They stood close together, their forms blurred but unmistakable. Shelter, perhaps, or simply another part of the landscape waiting to be passed through. He walked on, carrying the weight of that small encounter without letting it slow him down. Some things were meant to be noticed, not carried. The trees grew nearer with each step, their dark shapes rising quietly out of the fog. As he reached the edge of them, the air changed. It felt cooler, more still, as though the branches above were holding the mist in place. Moisture dripped softly from leaves and needles, landing on the ground with sounds so faint they barely seemed real. He moved between the trunks slowly, aware of how the fog threaded itself through the gaps, refusing to be left behind. The earth here was firmer, layered with fallen leaves and pine needles that softened his steps. The smell was different too, richer and deeper, carrying hints of resin and damp wood. It reminded him of walks taken long ago, when forests had felt like places of rest instead of passage. Light filtered through in thin, pale lines, breaking the gray into gentle shades. He paused to watch one of those lines fade and return as the fog shifted. It felt like time itself breathing, expanding and contracting without urgency. He let that feeling settle into him, easing the tightness he had been carrying for so long. For a moment he leaned lightly against a tree, resting his palm against the cool bark. The solid presence steadied him. The tree did not ask anything of him, It simply stood, offering quiet support. After a few slow breaths, he stepped away, grateful without needing to name why. The forest did not end the fog, but it softened it. And as he continued forward, he sensed that this small change mattered more than it seemed. The forest closed around him gently, not in a way that felt trapping, but protective. The fog hung lower here, weaving itself between trunks and branches, turning the space into a series of quiet rooms. Each step carried him from one to the next, as if he were passing through unseen doors. He listened to the sounds of the woods, faint but present, a distant creak of wood, the soft fall of moisture from leaf to ground. These small sounds filled the silence without breaking it, creating a calm that settled deep in his chest. He realized he had not felt this kind of calm in a long time. His pace slowed further, not from caution, but from a growing sense that there was no need to hurry. The path was not marked, yet it felt clear enough. He trusted his instincts, letting them guide him through the trees without overthinking each turn. A slight clearing appeared ahead, just a widening of space where the fog thinned and the light grew a little stronger. He stepped into it and felt a subtle warmth on his face, the first hint of the day beginning to wake. It was not bright, but it was real. He stood there for a moment, absorbing that gentle change. The fog still lingered at the edges, waiting patiently, but the clearing offered a pause, a breath. He understood then that progress did not always mean leaving things behind. Sometimes it meant finding room within them. After a while he stepped forward again, leaving the clearing as quietly as he had entered, carrying its calm with him into the trees beyond. Beyond the clearing, the forest began to thin, the trees spacing themselves farther apart, as if making room for what came next. The fog followed him still, but it no longer felt as heavy. It drifted instead of clinging, moving lazily between the trunks and then slipping away behind him. The ground sloped downward, and he adjusted his stride, letting gravity guide him gently forward. His body felt looser now, less tense than it had been earlier. Even the weight on his shoulders seemed more familiar, no longer something to fight against, but something to carry with quiet acceptance. He became aware of a new sound beneath his steps, the faint trickle of water. It grew clearer as he walked, until he reached a narrow stream cutting across his path. The water moved slowly, almost reluctantly, reflecting the gray sky in broken patterns. He crouched beside it and dipped his fingers in, feeling the cold bite briefly before his skin adjusted. The stream reminded him that movement did not have to be fast to be purposeful. It simply had to continue. He stood, stepping carefully across on stones half hidden beneath the surface, and resumed his walk on the other side. As he moved on, the fog lifted just enough for him to see farther than before. Not far, but farther. The path ahead was still uncertain, but it felt less overwhelming now. He carried on, guided by the quiet knowledge that each small crossing, each gentle descent, was shaping him in ways he would only understand later. The land beyond the stream opened into a wide, empty stretch where the forest finally gave way to low ground. Grass, pale and wet, brushed against his boots as he walked. The fog here was thinner, drifting in loose layers that revealed and concealed the space around him in slow waves. He noticed how the openness made him feel exposed at first. Without the trees, there was nowhere for the eye to rest, nowhere to lean against. But as he continued, that feeling softened. The open ground offered a different kind of comfort, one that came from being able to see more of the world, even if it was still blurred. His breathing deepened, and he felt his chest expand more fully than before. The air carried less of the forest's stillness and more of the field's quiet promise. Somewhere above, unseen, the sky was lifting, making space for the day. A line of low posts appeared ahead, barely visible through the fog. They stood evenly spaced, forming a path of sorts across the field. He followed them, appreciating the subtle guidance they offered. He did not need clear instructions. Small signs were enough. As he walked, he became aware of a growing steadiness inside himself. The fog was still present. The uncertainty had not vanished, but his relationship with it had changed. He no longer felt pushed or pulled by it. He moved within it calmly, step by step. The posts faded behind him one by one, and he continued forward, carrying that steadiness into the open ground ahead. The open field seemed to stretch on without end. It surfaced gently uneven beneath his feet. Tufts of grass leaned in different directions, shaped by wind he could not feel any more. The fog drifted low, thin enough now to let him sense the space around him, yet thick enough to keep the horizon hidden. It was a balance he was beginning to understand. His thoughts returned to the people he had passed without meeting, footprints, a shape in the mist, a helmet left behind. All of them felt connected, threads in a larger pattern he could not fully see. He realized that walking alone did not mean being separate. It only meant carrying your part quietly. A breeze moved through the field, barely noticeable, stirring the fog into slow motion. It brushed his face and dried some of the moisture there. He closed his eyes for a brief moment, letting that small change settle him. When he opened them again, the world felt slightly clearer, not brighter, just calmer. In the distance, something darker broke the pale field. He could not tell what it was yet, only that it stood still while everything else shifted. He walked toward it without urgency, trusting that whatever it was would reveal itself in time. His steps remained steady, unforced. The fog no longer felt like something to push through. It had become part of the journey, teaching him patience with every quiet mile. As he drew closer, the dark shape resolved into a small structure, low to the ground and weathered by time. It might once have been a shed or a simple shelter, its wood darkened by years of rain and cold. The fog curled around it, clinging to its edges as if unsure whether to let it remain or erase it entirely. He approached slowly, mindful of how sudden movement felt out of place in this softened world. The door hung slightly open, swaying almost imperceptibly. He stood there for a moment, listening. Nothing stirred inside. The silence felt deep, but not threatening. With a gentle push, he opened the door wider. Inside, the air was still and dry, holding the faint smell of old wood and earth. Light filtered in through narrow gaps, casting thin lines across the floor. He stepped inside and let the door rest behind him, not closing it fully, just enough to quiet the outside world. He rested there, standing rather than sitting, feeling the difference the shelter made. The fog could not reach him in the same way here. The cold softened. His breath no longer showed as clearly. It was a small relief, but a meaningful one. After a few slow breaths, he stepped back out again. The fog welcomed him immediately, wrapping around him as before. But now he knew that pauses were possible, that shelter existed even briefly along the way. He continued forward, carrying that knowledge with him as he left the small structure behind. The field began to narrow as he walked on, gradually guiding him toward a gentle bend in the land. The fog followed the curve, rolling softly ahead of him like a slow tide. He felt no need to hurry. The world was unfolding at its own pace, and he was learning to match it. His body felt different now, more settled. The stiffness in his shoulders had eased, replaced by a quiet endurance. Each step felt practiced, not forced. He realized that he had stopped measuring the distance he had covered and started paying attention only to the movement itself. A sound rose from the ground ahead, faint but rhythmic. As he approached, it became the steady tapping of something loose in the wind, perhaps a piece of metal or wood brushing against itself. The sound was gentle, repetitive, almost soothing. It marked time in a way that felt kinder than clocks or orders ever had. He passed the source without stopping, letting the sound fade behind him. The silence that followed felt fuller, as if shaped by what had just been heard. In that quiet, his thoughts remained calm, unhurried, open. The fog lifted slightly again, and he could see the curve of the land continuing onward. There was no clear end in sight, but there was direction, and for now that was enough. The curve of the land carried him into a place where the fog felt thinner still, stretched out like a veil instead of a wall. Shapes lingered longer before dissolving, and he found himself noticing the space between things, the distance from one step to the next, the pause between breaths, the quiet before a thought fully formed. His mind wandered gently without urgency. He thought about how mornings used to begin, marked by familiar routines and small choices. Here, morning was something different. It arrived slowly, without announcement, revealed only by subtle shifts in light and air. He realized he was learning a new way of noticing time, one that did not rush him forward. A single bird crossed overhead, unseen but heard, its call brief and soft. The sound surprised him not because it was loud, but because it reminded him that life continued beyond the fog, beyond this path. The call faded quickly, but it left a warmth behind, like a reassurance that the world was still turning. He adjusted his pace slightly, not faster, just more confident. His steps no longer hesitated before landing. The ground felt familiar beneath him now, as if he and the land had reached a quiet understanding. As he walked on, the fog shifted again, opening just enough to show the path curving onward. He followed it calmly, carrying with him the growing sense that even in uncertainty, there could be a steady kind of peace. The path became more defined beneath his feet, not marked by signs or stones, but by the simple feeling of having been walked before. The ground was firmer here, pressed down by many quiet journeys, each one leaving a trace too subtle to see, yet easy to feel. He followed that feeling without thinking, letting his body recognize what his eyes could not. The fog drifted higher now, lifting just enough to reveal the tops of distant shapes, perhaps trees, perhaps buildings, perhaps nothing at all. He did not strain to identify them. The effort felt unnecessary. Clarity, he had learned, arrived best when it was not forced. His breath warmed as his movement continued, and the cold no longer felt sharp. It had become a background presence, noticeable, but no longer demanding attention. He felt steadier in himself, as though the long walk had smoothed the rough edges inside him, leaving something quieter and more durable behind. A memory came to him then, not of a place, but of a feeling. The feeling of being unsure and continuing anyway. He realized he had carried that feeling before in other parts of his life, long before uniforms and fog. Remembering this made him feel less changed than he had believed. Perhaps he was still himself, just moving through a different kind of morning. The path curved gently again, leading him onward into the thinning mist. He followed without hesitation, trusting the quiet progress he had made. The fog thinned enough now that the light felt closer, resting gently on the field instead of hovering above it. It did not shine. It simply existed, pale and steady, like a promise that did not need words. He felt it on his face and hands, subtle but real, and welcomed it without expectation. His steps slowed, not because he was tired, but because he no longer felt chased by time. Each movement felt intentional, chosen. The ground answered him with quiet certainty, firm beneath his boots, no longer shifting or uncertain. It felt like an understanding had been reached between him and the land. In the distance, the shape of other figures appeared briefly, softened by the last layers of fog. They moved as he did, steadily and without urgency, each following their own quiet line forward. No one called out, no one waved. The shared direction was enough. He felt a sense of calm settle deeper inside him, the kind that comes not from knowing what will happen next, but from accepting that he will meet it when it arrives. The fog still lingered, but it no longer felt like something to walk through. It felt like something to walk with. He drew in a slow breath, held it for a moment, then let it go. The light ahead remained patient and unchanging, waiting as it always had. The figures in the distance gradually faded back into the thinning fog, not because they were gone, but because the moment no longer needed them. He walked on alone again, and this time the solitude felt gentle, almost companionable. It moved beside him without pressing in. The air carried a faint warmth now, subtle enough that he might have imagined it if he weren't paying attention. The cold still existed, but it had softened, losing its edge. He loosened his grip on the strap across his chest, letting his shoulders drop just a little. The small release felt like permission to rest while still moving forward. He noticed how quiet confidence had replaced his earlier uncertainty. Not confidence in outcomes, but confidence in the act of continuing. Each step felt complete in itself, needing no justification beyond the simple fact that it was taken. The fog lifted and settled in slow waves, no longer hiding everything at once. Pieces of the world revealed themselves and stayed a little longer. Patches of ground, distant shapes, the suggestion of a horizon. He did not rush toward clarity. He allowed it to come at its own pace. As he walked, he realized something gently surprising. The fog had taught him how to see differently, not farther but deeper, not faster but more fully. And with that understanding resting quietly inside him, he continued on. The ground beneath him began to change once more, growing smoother, more even, as though shaped by careful hands over time. His boots no longer sank into the earth. Instead, they rested firmly, each step answered with a quiet certainty that eased his body without him noticing right away. The fog now moved in gentle strands, drifting past instead of surrounding him completely. It felt less like an obstacle and more like a presence, something that shared the space without demanding attention. He could see farther ahead, not clearly, but clearly enough. A low sound reached him, distant and steady. It might have been voices, or perhaps the movement of equipment carried by the morning air. The sound did not alarm him. It felt expected, like the next page of a book turning on its own. He listened without stopping, letting it exist alongside his breathing. His thoughts were calm, unburdened by urgency. He no longer wondered when this walk would end. The need to measure progress had faded, replaced by a quiet acceptance of motion itself. Walking had become enough. He adjusted his pace slightly, not faster, not slower, simply aligned with the rhythm of the ground beneath him. The fog thinned again, just a little, as if acknowledging the steadiness he had found. And so he continued, guided not by certainty, but by balance, between what he could see and what he could not, between the weight he carried and the strength that carried him forward. The distant sounds grew slightly clearer as he moved on, still softened by the air but no longer indistinct. They rose and fell gently like waves breaking far from shore. He did not try to follow them directly. He trusted that if he kept walking, he would arrive where he needed to be. The fog continued to lift in small, careful ways. It no longer hid the ground at his feet, and he could see the subtle lines where others had passed before him. These marks were faint, nearly erased, yet they carried a quiet reassurance. He was not the first to walk this way, and he would not be the last. His breathing felt deeper now, easier. The rhythm of it matched his steps without effort. He felt present in his body, aware of the way his muscles moved and rested in turn. Fatigue was still there, but it had settled into something manageable, something honest. A soft change in the air told him the land was opening again. The space around him felt wider, less enclosed. He lifted his head slightly, sensing more than seeing the shape of what lay ahead. It felt like approaching the edge of something important, not dramatic, but meaningful. He did not rush toward that feeling. He allowed it to unfold at the same gentle pace as everything else. One step, then another. The fog thinned just a little more, and the path continued. The openness ahead revealed itself slowly, like a thought forming with care. The land widened into a broad stretch where the fog could no longer cling as tightly. It drifted upward in pale ribbons, leaving more of the world exposed with each passing moment. He noticed how sound carried differently here. Distant movements felt closer, clearer, though still muted. The world was waking in small, respectful ways, as if unwilling to break the calm that had settled over everything. He welcomed that gentleness, letting it guide his own pace. His steps felt lighter now, not because the weight had changed, but because he had learned how to carry it. The strap across his chest no longer pulled uncomfortably. It rested where it should, balanced, familiar. He adjusted it once more out of habit, then let his hands fall naturally at his sides. A sense of readiness stirred within him, quiet and steady. It was not the sharp alertness he had expected, but something deeper, more durable. He felt prepared not because he knew what would happen, but because he trusted himself to meet it. The fog thinned again, revealing more ground ahead. He walked on with calm assurance, aware that whatever waited beyond the mist would arrive soon enough. For now, there was still space to breathe, still time to move gently forward. The field ahead began to show clearer lines, subtle divisions in the ground that suggested order and intention. The fog lingered low, but it no longer erased these shapes completely. Instead, it softened them, as though inviting patience rather than demanding uncertainty. He followed one of these lines without thinking, letting it guide his steps. His body felt aligned with his movement, no longer resisting or questioning it. Each step flowed into the next, steady and calm, as if he had been walking this way for much longer than he realized. The air carried a faint metallic scent now, light but unmistakable. It reminded him that the quiet would not last forever. Instead of tightening, his chest softened around that knowledge. He accepted it as part of the morning, part of the path he was on. He noticed how his attention had sharpened without becoming tense. He saw more, heard more, felt more, yet none of it overwhelmed him. The fog had trained him in this gentle awareness, teaching him how to stay present without fear. As he continued forward, the light grew slightly stronger, enough to reveal more of the world's texture. Grass, earth, sky, all distinct now, though still muted. The journey was changing slowly, almost kindly. The light settled more fully now, spreading evenly across the ground without casting sharp shadows. It felt calm and restrained, as if the day itself were moving carefully, aware of where it had arrived. The fog remained, but it had loosened its hold, drifting at the edges rather than standing in the way. He slowed his pace again, not from hesitation, but from a sense of arrival, not an ending, just a moment where the path felt steadier beneath him. The land seemed to recognize his presence, offering quiet support through its firmness and shape. A low hum moved through the air, distant and constant. It was not loud enough to disturb the stillness, only enough to remind him that the world beyond this calm was beginning to stir. He listened without reacting, letting the sound exist alongside his breath. He felt grounded in a way he had not expected. The long walk through fog, uncertainty, and silence had not weakened him. It had done the opposite. It had given him space to settle into himself, to meet the morning without resistance. He took another step forward, then another, steady and unhurried. The fog continued to thin, and the path continued to open. Whatever lay ahead would come in time. For now, this quiet progress was enough. The ground beneath him felt unmistakably solid now, as though the land had finally finished shifting and decided where it would stand. His boots pressed down with confidence, and the faint dampness that once softened every step had nearly vanished. The fog lingered only in pale wisps, drifting lazily across the open space like remnants of a long-held breath. He became aware of how quiet his thoughts had grown, not empty, but settled. The questions that once crowded his mind no longer demanded answers. They rested quietly, content to wait. In their place was a simple awareness of movement, of balance, of being exactly where he was. A shape appeared ahead, clearer than anything he had seen all morning. It was still distant, but defined enough to feel real. He did not study it closely. He allowed it to remain what it was, trusting that understanding would come naturally when the distance closed. The air felt lighter now, easier to draw in. Each breath filled his chest without effort, warming him from the inside. He felt steady, composed, and present, as though the long walk had gently guided him into this moment without him noticing the change as it happened. He continued forward at the same calm pace, carrying the quiet strength the fog had taught him. Step by step, the world revealed itself not all at once, but exactly as much as he needed. The shape ahead slowly revealed itself as a line of low structures, their outlines softened by the last traces of fog. They stood close together, grounded and still, as though they had been waiting for the morning to catch up with them. The sight brought a quiet shift inside him, not excitement, but recognition. He approached without hurry. The air here felt different, carrying a faint warmth mixed with the lingering cool of night. Sounds became clearer, soft movements, distant footsteps, the muted presence of others beginning their day. None of it felt sudden. It felt like a natural continuation of the silence he had been walking through. As he drew nearer, the fog finally loosened its grip, lifting enough to show the ground clearly. The path beneath his feet was no longer a suggestion. It was defined, worn smooth by repeated passage. He followed it instinctively, trusting its direction. He noticed how his body responded to this change. His shoulders settled, his breath deepened. The long walk had not drained him, it had prepared him. He felt ready in a way that did not need words. The structures grew closer, and with them came the sense that the quiet part of the journey was ending. Not abruptly, but gently, like waking from a deep, steady sleep. He slowed as he reached the edge of the structures, letting the moment settle around him. The fog had thinned to almost nothing now, lingering only in shallow pockets where shadows still held the night. The air felt clearer, cleaner, as though it had been waiting for him to arrive. The buildings stood quietly, their surfaces worn and simple. Nothing about them demanded attention. They felt functional, steady, shaped by purpose rather than comfort. He passed a hand along a wall as he walked by, feeling the rough texture beneath his fingers. The solidness of it grounded him, reminding him that this place existed whether he was here or not. Nearby, a figure moved slowly, then another. They did not speak. There was an understanding in the way they shared the space, each aware of the others without needing acknowledgement. He felt himself become part of that shared silence, fitting into it as naturally as he had fit into the fog earlier. The long walk began to settle into his body, not as exhaustion, but as a quiet readiness. His movements felt precise and calm, as though every step had been preparing him for this moment. He realized that the journey through the fog had not been about reaching a destination. It had been about becoming steady enough to arrive. He took one more slow breath, feeling the air fill his lungs fully, then let it out. The morning was no longer waiting. It had begun. The morning light continued to spread, gentle and even, touching the edges of the buildings and the ground between them. It revealed small details he had not noticed at first. The faint marks of wear on doors, the uneven lines where earth met stone, the quiet signs of many mornings just like this one. Nothing here felt new, yet everything felt present. He moved slowly through the space, adjusting to this clearer world. Without the fog, distance returned, and with it, a sense of scale. He could see where paths led, where they crossed, where they disappeared beyond the structures. The knowledge did not overwhelm him. It settled calmly, like a map unfolding without urgency. The sounds around him grew slightly louder, though still restrained. Footsteps, soft exchanges of tools, the low murmur of life beginning its routine. He listened without trying to focus on any one thing. The whole scene felt balanced, held together by quiet purpose. He realized that the fog had not left him empty-handed. It had given him patience. It had taught him how to move without rushing, how to listen without needing answers right away. Even here, with clearer air and solid ground, those lessons stayed with him. He paused once more, just long enough to acknowledge the shift from silence to presence. Then he stepped forward, calm and ready, carrying the quiet strength of the morning with him. He followed one of the paths leading away from the cluster of buildings, his steps unhurried, measured. The ground was dry now, firm beneath his boots, and the rhythm of his walk felt smooth and assured. Without the fog, the world appeared simpler, stripped of mystery but rich in quiet detail. Light reflected softly off surfaces around him, revealing muted colors shaped by wear and weather. Nothing shone brightly. Everything seemed to exist in harmony with the early hour, as though the day itself was easing into being. He felt no urge to rush ahead of it. As he walked, he noticed how his senses had adjusted. Sounds no longer startled him. Movement no longer demanded immediate attention. He took everything in calmly, trusting his ability to respond when needed. This quiet readiness felt stronger than any sudden alertness ever had. The path curved gently, leading him toward open ground beyond the buildings. He sensed that the fog, though gone, had left its imprint on him. It had slowed his thoughts, softened his reactions, and given him a steadiness that would remain. He continued on, feeling both the weight of what lay ahead and the calm that allowed him to carry it. The morning moved forward with him unhurried and sure. The open ground beyond the path stretched wide and quiet, touched fully now by the pale light of morning. The air felt clean, almost still, carrying only the soft sounds of movement far away. He stepped into that space with a sense of balance, aware of his surroundings without feeling watched by them. He noticed how his body responded to the openness. His stride lengthened slightly, natural and unforced. The tension that once lived in his shoulders had eased into a steady readiness. He felt present, anchored, as though the long walk had aligned him with the ground beneath his feet. A distant sound drifted across the open space, steady and low. It did not demand attention, but it marked the passage of time in a gentle way. He listened briefly, then let it fade into the background, trusting that it would return when it needed to be heard. The morning continued to unfold without hurry. Light settled on the land evenly, revealing small variations in texture and color. He took it all in calmly, appreciating how clarity did not arrive all at once, but in layers, just as the fog had once done. He moved forward with quiet certainty, knowing that the journey was still ongoing, even if the fog was behind him now. What mattered was not how far he had come, but how steadily he continued. The openness gradually gave way to gentle contours in the land, shallow rises and dips that guided his steps without effort. He adjusted naturally, letting his body respond to the terrain as it had learned to do through the long morning. Nothing felt sudden. Everything unfolded with quiet intention. He became aware of a subtle warmth spreading through him, not just from movement, but from a sense of belonging to the moment. The fog had stripped things down to their simplest form, and now, in its absence, the world felt honest and clear. He did not feel lighter because the weight was gone. He felt lighter because he knew how to carry it. A soft wind moved across the ground, brushing against his coat and passing on. It carried no message, only motion. He welcomed it, letting it pass through without holding on. Some things were meant to move freely, not to be kept. His thoughts remained steady, untroubled by what might come next. He trusted the calm he had earned, the patience shaped by every step through uncertainty. Whatever lay ahead would be met the same way he had met the fog, slowly, attentively, and without resistance. He continued forward, each step grounded, each breath even, moving with the quiet confidence of someone who had learned how to walk through what once felt impossible. The land ahead felt settled, as though it had finished changing for the day. The ground held his steps without giving way, and the air no longer shifted unexpectedly. Everything seemed to have found its place, including him. He moved through this calm with a steady heart, no longer bracing himself for what might emerge. He noticed how his breathing had become almost effortless. Each inhale filled him gently, each exhale released without tension. The simple act of breathing felt like a quiet agreement between his body and the morning, a shared understanding that there was time enough for both movement and rest. In the distance, the sounds of others continued, steady and restrained. They blended into the landscape rather than standing apart from it. He did not feel the need to seek them out or avoid them. Their presence existed alongside his own, balanced and calm. He thought briefly of the fog again, not with relief that it was gone, but with gratitude for what it had given him. It had slowed him. It had taught him to listen. It had shown him that forward did not have to mean fast. Those lessons remained, quiet and dependable. He walked on, carrying that understanding into the open morning, each step measured, each moment complete in itself. The morning now felt fully awake, though it still moved with restraint. Light rested evenly across the land, no longer tentative, yet not harsh. It revealed the small imperfections in the ground, the places where earth had been pressed down, disturbed, and then settled again. He walked through these signs without judgment, understanding that change always left marks behind. His body felt balanced, neither tense nor loose, simply ready. The long walk had shaped him quietly, teaching him where to place his feet, when to slow, when to breathe deeper. He no longer thought about these things. They happened naturally, like instincts returning after a long absence. A brief pause came over him, not from command but from intuition. He stopped, standing still, and listened. The world answered with soft sound and steady presence. Nothing demanded action in that moment, and that too felt important. He realized then that the fog had never been something to defeat. It had been something to move through, and in doing so it had given him a calm he might not have found otherwise. Even now, in clearer air, that calm remained, woven into the way he stood and the way he breathed. After a few quiet seconds, he stepped forward again, unhurried and certain, continuing the path that was no longer hidden. The path ahead was clear now, not because it was marked, but because it felt familiar. His feet seemed to know where to go before his mind caught up, carrying him forward with a quiet confidence shaped by every step that came before. The morning held steady around him, neither urging nor resisting. He noticed how his attention rested lightly on the world instead of gripping it. He saw encouragement in small things, the way light settled without glare, the way the air stayed calm, the way the ground met him with patience. These were not signs of certainty, but they were enough. A memory rose and passed without weight, like a cloud drifting through an open sky. He did not follow it. He let it go. There was room now for letting things pass without needing to hold them. That space felt like a gift he had earned slowly, one quiet mile at a time. He adjusted his pace by instinct, aligning himself with the day's gentle rhythm. Nothing felt rushed. Nothing felt delayed. The balance surprised him, and then it didn't. He had learned how to move within uncertainty without being shaped by it. He continued forward, steady and present, carrying the calm that had grown inside him like a quiet flame, small, reliable, and enough to guide him on. The quiet flame inside him burned steadily now, not bright enough to draw attention, but strong enough to endure. He felt it with each step, a calm warmth that did not rush or demand. It simply stayed. The morning seemed to recognize it, meeting his pace with the same unspoken agreement. The land ahead opened once more, wider than before, and he sensed a turning point without needing to name it. Not a sudden shift, not a clear boundary, just the feeling that something had settled into place. The fog was gone, but its lessons lingered, shaping the way he looked, the way he moved, the way he waited. He became aware of the horizon for the first time, faint but real. It did not promise answers. It offered direction. That was enough. He let his eyes rest there briefly, then returned his attention to the ground beneath his feet, honoring the step he was taking now. A gentle tiredness touched him, the kind that follows effort honestly given. It did not weaken him. It reminded him that he had walked far, and that rest, when it came, would be deserved. Until then, he would continue, calmly and with care. He moved forward into the open morning, carrying patience like a second breath, knowing that whatever waited ahead would be met the same way he had met the fog, one steady step at a time. The horizon grew a little clearer as he walked, not closer, just more defined, like a thought finally taking shape after a long silence. The light now felt complete, settled into the land without hesitation. Shadows existed, but they were soft, resting gently instead of stretching or hiding. He felt the quiet tiredness deepen, spreading evenly through his body. It was not the kind that asked him to stop immediately, but the kind that reminded him he was human, moving within his limits. He welcomed it, adjusting his pace just enough to honor what his body was telling him. Around him, the world moved in small, careful ways. Distant figures crossed paths far away. Sounds rose and fell without urgency. Nothing demanded his attention all at once. He realized that this balance between awareness and calm was something he would carry beyond this morning. He thought briefly of the fog again, how it had once hidden everything, how it had asked him to trust what he could not see. Now, with clearer air, that trust remained. It no longer depended on mist or uncertainty. It lived inside him, steady and quiet. He took another step, then another, each one grounded and deliberate. The journey was nearly complete, not because the walking would end, but because he had learned how to walk through whatever came next. The morning reached its full calm as he took the final steps of this long, quiet journey. The land lay open before him, clear and steady, shaped by light rather than fog. He felt the weight he carried settle into place, no longer something to adjust or resist, but something he understood. He paused, standing still, letting the moment hold him. The sounds around him blended into a gentle hum of presence, life continuing, steady and restrained. He did not feel the need to move right away. This pause felt earned, shaped by every careful step through uncertainty and silence. Looking ahead, he did not search for certainty. He accepted what was there, trusting the patience he had learned. The fog of the morning was gone, but its lessons remained, woven into his breath, his balance, his way of being. He took one last slow breath, feeling the air fill him fully, then let it go with quiet ease. Whatever came next would be met calmly, one step at a time, guided by the same steady presence that had carried him through the fog. And so he moved forward into the day, unhurried, grounded, and ready. As this story comes to rest, thank you for sharing this quiet journey. If you found comfort here, you're gently invited to like, subscribe, and leave a comment about where you're listening from and what time the story reached you. Now, let your breathing slow again and allow yourself to rest, carrying this calm with you into sleep or into the gentle hours ahead.